Israel launches precision strikes on 5 key Iranian nuclear facilities amid heightened regional tensions. Date, June 12, 2025. Summary. On June 12, 2025, Israel executed a large-scale military operation termed Operation Rising Lion, targeting over 100 sites across Iran, including pivotal nuclear facilities. This aggressive action has escalated tensions in the region, significantly drawing widespread international condemnation and prompting Iranian officials to declare the strikes a declaration of war. Key events and timeline. June 12, 2025, the Israeli Defense Forces IDF commenced Operation Rising Lion, deploying around 200 fighter jets in a coordinated attack on multiple Iranian installations. The primary focus was the Natanz nuclear enrichment facility, a cornerstone of Iran's nuclear ambitions. The operation was characterized as a preemptive, precise combined offensive aimed at dismantling Iran's pathways to nuclear weapons. Impact of the strikes. The airstrikes resulted in substantial casualties, reportedly killing several high-ranking military leaders and nuclear scientists, including the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps (IRGC) and 6 nuclear experts. The scale of the operation and its implications have raised concerns about a potential wider conflict in the region, leading Israel to close its diplomatic missions and prompting airlines to reroute flights away from Iranian airspace. Iran's reaction. In response, Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei vowed severe punishment for Israel, while the IRGC warned of impending retaliation. Reports from Iranian state media indicated widespread panic among civilians in Tehran, highlighting the chaos unleashed by the strikes. International response. The operation drew various international reactions. Former U.S. President Donald Trump praised the attacks, suggesting that further military actions could follow unless Iran complied with demands regarding its nuclear program. This stance conflicted with the current U.S. administration's approach, as Secretary of State Marco Rubio asserted that the U.S. had not participated in the strikes and emphasized the need to protect American forces in the region. Common key points across sources. 1. Scope of the attacks. Multiple reports unanimously highlighted the extensive nature of the Israeli strikes, targeting a range of military and nuclear sites, marking a significant escalation in hostilities between Israel and Iran. 2. Casualties. The attacks resulted in considerable loss of life among Iran's military and scientific leadership, a detail consistently reported across various news outlets. 3. Escalation of tensions. There was a shared acknowledgement of the potentially destabilizing impact of the strikes on regional stability, with significant fears of Iranian retaliation and broader implications for international security. Differences between sources. Casualty details. While The Guardian detailed specific names of key Iranian figures killed in the strikes, sources like CNN and Reuters focused more broadly on the scale and intent of the operation. Political reactions. The Guardian's coverage included extensive commentary from Trump, providing insight into the political dynamics between the U.S. and Israel. In contrast, other sources offered a more straightforward account of the events without delving deeply into the U.S. political context. In-depth analysis of the operation. The operation, which Israel labeled as a necessary step to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, was executed with a level of precision that showcased Israel's military capabilities. The airstrikes targeted key facilities integral to Iran's uranium enrichment processes and ballistic missile programs. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defended the action, emphasizing the urgency of addressing what he described as an existential threat to Israel. Netanyahu's statement indicated the strikes were just the initial phase of a larger military campaign, hinting at sustained military engagement in the region. He characterized the strikes as a critical measure to disrupt Iran's nuclear weaponization efforts, which he claimed had recently escalated. Civilian impact and regional reactions. The civilian response in Iran was marked by fear and confusion. Eyewitness accounts described chaotic scenes in Tehran, with residents reporting loud explosions and a frantic scramble for information. The strikes not only targeted military installations but also caused collateral damage in civilian areas, further exacerbating tensions. Neighboring countries reacted with concern over the potential spillover effects of the conflict. Iraq reported that Iranian drones had crossed its airspace shortly after the strikes, raising alarms about the possibility of retaliation that could involve other nations in the region. Conclusion: Israel's Operation Rising Lion represents a significant escalation in military confrontations related to Iran's nuclear program. The operation has led to a considerable loss of life and has heightened tensions across the Middle East, with far-reaching implications for international relations and security dynamics. As the situation unfolds, the potential for further conflict remains a pressing concern for both regional and global stakeholders. The unfolding crisis underscores the complexities of Middle Eastern geopolitics, where military actions have profound implications for diplomatic relations and the stability of the region. The international community now faces the challenge of navigating the aftermath of this conflict, with calls for de-escalation and diplomatic engagement becoming increasingly urgent. The article provides a detailed account of Israel's military Operation Rising Lion, which was launched on June 12, 2025. Targeting key Iranian nuclear facilities amid escalating regional tensions. The operation has profound implications for international relations, particularly regarding the dynamics between Israel, Iran, and the United States. Here are some counterintuitive insights from the content. 1. Perception of unilateral action. While the U.S. administration, represented by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, publicly distanced itself from the Israeli strikes, former President Donald Trump's praise for the operation implies a level of tacit support or coordination that contradicts the official narrative. This highlights a dissonance within U.S. political responses, suggesting that while the current administration seeks to maintain a neutral stance, there may be underlying support for aggressive actions against Iran. 2. Casualty reports. The strikes reportedly resulted in the deaths of high-ranking Iranian military leaders and nuclear scientists, which is a significant escalation. However, this level of targeted action raises the question: why would Israel risk such a large-scale retaliation by eliminating key figures in Iran's nuclear program? The counterintuitive aspect here is that while the operation was intended to diminish Iran's nuclear capabilities, it may also solidify Iran's resolve to retaliate and escalate military tensions further. 3. International reactions. The immediate international condemnation of the attacks, including from allies like Saudi Arabia, suggests a complex geopolitical landscape where even traditional adversaries of Iran may not support such overt military actions. This reaction is counterintuitive because one might expect a more unified front against Iran's nuclear ambitions. Instead, the strikes have prompted fears of destabilization that could impact surrounding nations, leading to calls for de-escalation rather than further military engagement. For domestic implications in Iran, the chaos and panic reported in Tehran indicate that the strikes have not only military but also psychological impacts on the Iranian populace. The fear experienced by civilians, as described by residents in Tehran, suggests that military actions can inadvertently unite a populace around a nationalistic sentiment against perceived aggressors. This could lead to heightened domestic support for the government and increased tensions, countering the intended effect of weakening Iran's resolve. 5. Timing of the operation. The operation occurred just before a scheduled round of U.S.-Iranian talks aimed at finding a diplomatic solution to the nuclear issue. This timing is counterintuitive. One might expect diplomatic efforts to precede military action rather than follow it. The decision to strike at such a critical juncture raises questions about Israel's strategic calculations and the potential undermining of diplomatic channels that could lead to de-escalation. 6. Use of language. The description of the operation as a preemptive, precise, combined offensive frames Israel's actions in a defensive context, suggesting that it was acting out of necessity rather than aggression. This characterization could be seen as counterintuitive in light of the significant loss of life and the label of declaration of war by Iranian officials. The framing of military action as defensive can often be a tactic to garner domestic and international support despite the aggressive nature of the operations. These insights reveal the complexities and contradictions inherent in military and political strategies in the Middle East, particularly regarding the interactions between Israel, Iran, and the United States. The implications of Operation Rising Lion extend beyond immediate military objectives, influencing regional stability and international diplomatic relations. The report on Israel's military Operation Rising Lion against Iranian nuclear facilities on June 12, 2025 is significant for several reasons, particularly elements that might be overlooked by the general populace. Here are the critical overlooked aspects, coupled with their significance. 1. Operational scale and military strategy. While many reports emphasize the death toll and the immediate political ramifications, the scale of the operation itself is profound. Over 100 sites were targeted, including key military and nuclear facilities. This operation involved approximately 200 fighter jets, indicating a level of military coordination and precision that could redefine air warfare strategies. Significance: the sophistication and scope of the operation illustrate a shift in military engagement norms in the region. Such extensive operations could serve as a blueprint for future conflicts not just in the Middle East but globally. The ability of a nation-state to conduct a large-scale coordinated military operation against another sovereign state raises questions about international military protocols and the potential for escalation. 2. Casualty profiles and leadership elimination. The strikes reportedly killed several high-ranking military leaders and nuclear scientists, including the head of the IRGC and key figures in Iran's nuclear development program. This specific targeting of leaders within the military establishment goes beyond mere collateral damage. It represents a strategic decapitation aimed at crippling Iran's military capabilities. Significance: eliminating key personnel can lead to a power vacuum and potential chaos within the Iranian military hierarchy. This could destabilize Iran further, potentially leading to internal conflict or a shift in governance that may not favor international relations. The targeting of individuals with specific expertise also signals a willingness to engage in targeted assassinations as a means of state policy, which could set a precedent for future military engagements. 3. Political dynamics and U.S. involvement. The reactions from U.S. political figures, particularly former President Donald Trump, reveal layers of political dynamics that are often overlooked. Trump's praise for the operation and implicit threats of further action suggest a level of coordination or at least alignment with Israeli interests that contradicts the current U.S. administration's official stance of non-involvement. Significance: this divergence in political messaging indicates a potential rift in U.S. foreign policy approaches, which could lead to confusion among allies and adversaries alike. It raises questions about the future of U.S.-Israeli relations and how domestic political dynamics in the U.S. could influence foreign military actions, notably if a former president appears to advocate for military actions that the current administration publicly distances itself from. 4. Regional stability and broader implications. The immediate aftermath of the strikes has led to heightened fears of a broader regional conflict, with Iranian retaliation being a significant concern. The Iranian supreme leader's vow for severe punishment indicates a potential for escalated hostilities, which could involve other regional actors. Significance: the potential for a wider conflict underscores the delicate balance of power in the Middle East. Other nations such as Saudi Arabia and Iraq are also affected, as they may become entangled in retaliatory actions or military escalations. The situation could alter alliances and provoke arms races, fundamentally destabilizing the region. This broader geopolitical context is crucial for understanding the implications of the operation beyond the immediate military objectives. 5. Public sentiment and civilian impact. The report mentions civilian panic and destruction in Tehran but lacks a deeper analysis of the long-term impacts on Iranian society. The chaos and fear among civilians following such strikes can lead to increased anti-Israel sentiments and potentially radicalize portions of the population. Significance: understanding public sentiment is crucial for assessing the long-term viability of peace and stability in the region. Civilian experiences of trauma and loss often shape national narratives and can contribute to cycles of violence. Ignoring the human element in military operations risks oversimplifying complex geopolitical conflicts and their resolutions. 6. Nuclear non-proliferation implications. While the strikes were justified by Israel as necessary to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, the operation itself raises questions about the effectiveness of existing non-proliferation treaties and international oversight. Significance: the failure of diplomatic measures to prevent Iran's nuclear advancements culminating in military action highlights the limitations of current frameworks like the Non-Proliferation Treaty (NPT). This could inspire other nations to pursue their nuclear ambitions outside of international agreements, fearing similar preemptive strikes. The long-term implications for global nuclear governance could be profound, potentially leading to a more militarized approach to international relations. 7. Information warfare and strategic communication. The Israeli operation was accompanied by a narrative of self-defense and preemption, which is a crucial element of information warfare. The framing of the operation as a necessary response to an imminent threat influences public perception and justifies military action. Significance: the role of media narratives and strategic communication in shaping public opinion and international responses cannot be understated. Effective framing can garner domestic and international support for military actions, and understanding this aspect is critical for analyzing contemporary geopolitical conflicts. The use of information as a tactical tool has implications for how future conflicts will be managed and publicized. Conclusion: the report on Operation Rising Lion contains layers of complexity that extend far beyond the immediate military action. The implications for regional stability, international relations, and the evolving nature of warfare are significant. Recognizing these overlooked aspects can provide a deeper understanding of the geopolitical landscape and the potential future trajectories of conflict in the Middle East. As the situation develops, the interplay between military might, political narratives, and civilian impacts will be crucial in shaping both immediate responses and long-term implications for peace and security. 1. Scope and impact of Operation Rising Lion. The launch of Operation Rising Lion by Israel on June 12, 2025 marked one of the most extensive military operations against Iran to date, targeting over 100 military and nuclear facilities, including crucial sites like the Natanz nuclear enrichment facility. The operation involved approximately 200 Israeli fighter jets and was characterized as a preemptive, precise combined offensive. This scope not only emphasizes Israel's determination to dismantle Iran's nuclear ambitions but also signifies a potential shift in the operational dynamics within the region. The significant casualties, including the deaths of senior military leaders and nuclear scientists, are indicative of the operation's severe implications for Iran's military capabilities and nuclear progression. The operation's scale and execution underscore the growing military confrontation between Israel and Iran, raising questions about future conflicts and regional stability. 2. Geopolitical ramifications and international reactions. The airstrikes have evoked widespread international condemnation and intensified fears of a broader regional conflict. Iranian officials have labeled the attacks a declaration of war, signaling a potential escalation in hostilities. The regional response, including statements from Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei vowing severe punishment against Israel, points to the likelihood of retaliatory actions that could destabilize the Middle East further. The reactions from global leaders, particularly from the U.S. political landscape, with former President Trump endorsing the strikes while the current administration emphasized non-involvement, complicate the geopolitical landscape. This dichotomy reflects the intricate web of alliances and enmities that characterize Middle Eastern geopolitics, underscoring the challenges for diplomatic resolutions in the context of escalating military actions. 3. The role of nuclear proliferation concerns. Central to the conflict is the issue of nuclear proliferation, as Israel's justification for the strikes hinges on Iran's advancing nuclear program. Prime Minister Netanyahu's assertions that Iran was on the brink of developing nuclear weapons highlight the urgency perceived by Israel regarding its own security. This situation is exacerbated by Iran's reported accumulation of highly enriched uranium and the potential for weaponization. The international community's focus on Iran's nuclear activities, particularly in light of the International Atomic Energy Agency's findings of Iran's violations, emphasizes the critical nature of nuclear non-proliferation discussions. The escalation resulting from Israel's preemptive strikes raises significant questions about the effectiveness of diplomatic negotiations aimed at curbing Iran's nuclear ambitions and the potential for triggering an arms race in the region. 4. Implications for future U.S.-Iran relations and Middle Eastern stability. The strikes have occurred against the backdrop of upcoming U.S.-Iranian talks aimed at finding a diplomatic solution to the nuclear standoff, which complicates prospects for dialogue and peace. The contrasting positions of the U.S. administration and former President Trump's support for Israel's military actions reflect a fragmented approach to foreign policy regarding Iran. This divergence complicates the already tense U.S.-Iran relations and poses challenges for any future negotiations. The potential for retaliatory measures from Iran, coupled with the heightened military readiness from both sides, suggests a precarious balance of power that may lead to further conflict. The situation calls for careful consideration by international stakeholders to prevent a broader regional war and to seek avenues for de-escalation in an increasingly volatile environment. 1. Operation Opera 1981. In June 1981, Israel conducted a preemptive airstrike known as Operation Opera against the Osirak nuclear reactor in Iraq. The Israeli Air Force targeted the facility, which was believed to be under construction and capable of producing nuclear weapons. The operation was justified by Israel as a necessity to prevent a potential threat from Saddam Hussein's regime. The strike led to international condemnation but was praised by some as a decisive action that prevented Iraq from acquiring nuclear capabilities. 2. U.S. airstrikes on Libya 1986. In April 1986, the United States launched airstrikes against Libya in response to the bombing of a Berlin nightclub that killed American servicemen. Dubbed Operation El Dorado Canyon, the U.S. targeted various military sites and the compound of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The strikes were intended to deter future acts of terrorism attributed to Libya. The operation resulted in significant damage but also raised concerns about U.S. military intervention and its implications for international law and sovereignty. 3. NATO air campaign in Kosovo 1999. The NATO air campaign against Serbia during the Kosovo War began in March 1999 and lasted for 78 days. NATO intervened without United Nations approval, citing humanitarian concerns and the need to prevent ethnic cleansing of Albanians in Kosovo. The airstrikes targeted military and infrastructure sites across Serbia and Montenegro. While the campaign ultimately led to the withdrawal of Serbian forces from Kosovo, it sparked debates about the legality of humanitarian intervention and the responsibility to protect civilians in conflict zones. Future outlook, predictions following Israel's Operation Rising Lion. The military operation conducted by Israel against Iran, known as Operation Rising Lion, is poised to dramatically reshape the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. As tensions escalate and reactions unfold, several key predictions can be made regarding the future implications of this operation. 1. Escalation of military conflicts. In the immediate aftermath of Operation Rising Lion, a significant escalation in military confrontations is expected. Iran has already vowed retaliation, and the likelihood of increased drone and missile attacks against Israeli targets is high. This could lead to a tit-for-tat cycle of violence, drawing in regional allies and complicating existing conflicts. Countries like Hezbollah in Lebanon and various militia groups in Iraq and Syria may increase their hostilities against Israel in support of Iran, leading to a broader regional war. 2. Global diplomatic fallout. The international community's response will be crucial in shaping future developments. With the attack being labeled a declaration of war by Iranian officials, we can anticipate a diplomatic crisis. Countries that traditionally support Iran, such as Russia and China, may ramp up their backing for Tehran, providing military and economic support. Conversely, Israel may strengthen its ties with the United States and other Western allies, potentially resulting in a polarized global response. 3. Shift in U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. response will play a pivotal role in future dynamics. While the current administration has distanced itself from the Israeli strikes, pressure may mount to adopt a more proactive stance in the region. This could lead to an increase in military presence or support for Israel, further straining relations with Iran and its allies. Alternatively, a push for renewed diplomatic negotiations could emerge as a counterbalance to military escalations, although the success of such efforts remains uncertain. 4. Increased nuclear proliferation risks. With Iran's nuclear program now facing direct military threats, the likelihood of Tehran accelerating its nuclear ambitions increases. The regime may decide to expedite its nuclear weapons development as a means of deterrence against Israeli aggression. This could trigger a regional arms race, with neighboring states such as Saudi Arabia and Egypt considering their own nuclear capabilities in response to a potentially nuclear-armed Iran. 5. Humanitarian crisis and civilian impact. The military strikes have already caused significant civilian casualties and destruction. As hostilities escalate, the humanitarian situation in Iran could deteriorate, leading to widespread displacement and suffering. This may result in an influx of refugees into neighboring countries, further straining regional resources and creating potential flashpoints for conflict. 6. Cyber warfare and information operations. Anticipating retaliation, both Israel and Iran are likely to engage in cyber warfare. Iran has previously demonstrated its capabilities in cyber attacks, and Israel has a robust cyber defense system. A cyber conflict could target critical infrastructure, financial systems, and information networks, complicating the operational landscape and affecting civilian life. 7. Long-term strategic realignments. The confrontation may lead to reconfigurations of alliances in the Middle East. Countries previously hesitant to publicly align with Israel may reconsider their positions in light of perceived threats from Iran. This could lead to new diplomatic agreements or military cooperation among Gulf states and Israel, further isolating Iran. 8. Impact on global oil markets. Given Iran's significant role in oil production and the potential for conflict to disrupt supply routes, global oil prices may experience volatility. Any prolonged military engagement or threat to shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz could lead to spikes in oil prices, impacting economies worldwide. 9. Increased focus on defense spending. In light of the heightened threat environment, countries in the Middle East may increase their military expenditures. This arms buildup could further destabilize the region as nations prioritize defense in response to perceived threats, potentially diverting funds from social and economic development. 10. Potential for U.S.-Iranian negotiations. While the immediate future appears grim, history has shown that prolonged conflicts can lead to negotiations, depending on the level of destruction and civilian discontent. Both sides may eventually seek diplomatic solutions. International mediators could play a role in facilitating dialogue aimed at de-escalating tensions and establishing a framework for future engagement regarding Iran's nuclear program. Conclusion. The fallout from Operation Rising Lion is likely to reverberate throughout the Middle East and beyond. With military, diplomatic, and economic ramifications on the horizon, the region stands at a critical juncture. The potential for conflict escalation is high, but so too is the opportunity for diplomatic resolution in the long term. Stakeholders will need to navigate a complex and evolving landscape to prevent further deterioration of regional and global stability.